This is the Trade Finance Distribution Initiative podcast, home to the growing business community of trade finance stakeholders and institutions making this asset class investable. I'm Andy Duckworth, and on this podcast we're featuring a new member of the TFDI, INX. INX is a US-regulated hub for cryptocurrencies and security tokens for trading and investing in digital assets. Its INX One trading platform provides access to multiple assets and investment opportunities. Bob Ejodame is Vice President of Capital Markets at INX and is going to tell us more. Hi, Bob.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Andy.
Great to have you with us today. Now, Bob, before you tell us more about INX, tell us a bit about yourself and your journey to where you are today.
Yes, absolutely. I'm Bob Ejodame. I've been in traditional financial markets for the last 20 years or so, just over 20 years. I started out working for a large interdealer broker on an institutional foreign exchange platform that was used by the largest banks globally, tier one banks, including central banks, and held roles varying from, operational roles to product ownership and digital transformations. And so I've always kind of sat between the business and technology and kind of delivered the best value in both directions. I've also, had a couple of startups, so quite entrepreneurial as well in my nature. About 6 years ago, I thought, let's go and sign up on one of these things called crypto exchanges and see what it's all about. 7 years ago now. So this was in a 2017, run. And that was kind of my initial sort of exposure into the exciting, crazy world of crypto. At the time, ICOs were happening, initial coin offerings, which is part of INX's story. I'll come to that in a second. So 3 years later, in 2020, I wanted to join, get involved more seriously, more professionally. And I thought, how amazing would it be to be part of a digital assets or crypto business that is actually legitimate, that's licensed, that's somehow regulated. And at the time, I thought that's just going to be impossible to find. But then surely enough, through a previous relationship at a previous role, I came across the fact that INX had just gotten approval from the United States Securities and Exchange Commission to run the first ever IPO on the blockchain. And I reached out and instantly, we agreed that they wanted to get me on board to build out all of the operations. And so that was my, the final sort of step into the blockchain, digital assets, crypto space, but exactly the way I had wished I could, which was in this, regulated environment. So, 3.5 years later, I've pivoted away from that operations role into the head of business development and VP of capital markets. And what a ride it has been. So yeah, truly, I feel truly lucky to be, in this space, in this role at this time. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, very exciting time. So you're at INX now. Now, your website mentions trade and invest in digital assets. So can you tell us what is meant by digital assets?
Absolutely. We're taking existing definitions of securities, and these are definitions that have existed for decades, with all of the necessary protections that come with, investor protections, risk disclosures, all of the usual attributes of a security, but we're moving away from a paper-based or, electronic record of a security to a version of that security that sits on a blockchain, that is represented through a token, a digital token, that represents ownership of something, right? Ownership of equity, ownership of debt, of a revenue share, of a classic car collection, of a of a fractionalized piece of real estate, all of which are securities. All of these examples that I just described, but representing that security on the blockchain brings about various efficiencies, improvements, transparency, and so on and so forth. And so what INX has done is to acquire the licensing and the regulatory umbrella to be able to transition those securities from those traditional definitions into this new definition. Included in, digital assets, you could argue are, the cryptocurrencies or stable coins. And what INX aimed to do was to offer a full ecosystem that would cater to all of the above. And we successfully did that and are one of the very few that have, that have bridged crypto, stable coins, and digital securities, in under this INX One platform that we rolled out a couple of years ago.
Great. And what industries are starting to adopt digital assets and their use cases?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, when we look at how industries get disrupted or have gotten disrupted over time, whether that's, Uber or Amazon or the many examples, it's each industry has to assess the technology, assess the changes, the combination of the technology and potentially the regulation, if it's already available, and identify how that could disrupt or empower their industries. I, at this time, have spoken to, representatives of maybe 15 to 20 kind of broad industry verticals, all of whom are very much, making good progress on identifying what those opportunities are, whether it's cost savings, whether it's, all other kinds of efficiencies. Real estate was one of the very first kind of, industries that everyone said, think about these illiquid, properties and giant projects, hotels, you name it. And what if you fractionalized, a $50 million hotel and, raised capital that way and then, built the property or developed the property and then rewarded all of those investors, through some kind of profit sharing or revenue sharing. So real estate was one of the very early kind of, movers. Having said that, it hasn't actually quite transpired that real estate has been transformed by tokenization. So that's just one example. There is more specifically in the context of the TFDI, debt, private debt and debt securities are another, industry vertical or asset class within the financial markets that could benefit very much from a tokenized model. Funds, asset managers, money market guys, these are all very much actively working on pushing out tokenized, proof of concepts, if you want to call it that, right? Everyone's trying to get their fund out that has a tokenization element to it. And whether that's because, again, within an institutional only context, it helps potentially disintermediate and increase settlement times and thereby reduce risk and costs, or in a retail context, tap liquidity in a much broader global context, and maybe fill these allocations that they're, with tinier ticket sizes, $500, $1,000 ticket sizes, but basically still be able to tap new participants in the space. I think sports and entertainment, just to give you one last example, that's one that I'm very excited about. We're doing some really exciting things there. So think about, sports clubs, think about games, gaming studios that have seen significant changes in the VC investment model. that need to find funding elsewhere, they can start looking at how to leverage, like the INX model to go raise capital from, retail investors, all over the world. Or even up-and-coming artists and sports professionals that want to raise capital and reward their investors with a share of their future earnings and future image rights. So the list goes on and on and on, and this is why I said it's truly exciting to be in my role, because I'm literally speaking to all kinds of players across the across the global economy.
And like you say, it sounds like these use cases are going to grow and grow. And on that, how is the regulators and how are the regulators adapting to it?
Well, some slower than others. We've seen the European Union be very decisive and set out a plan and a timeline, and they delivered against that. So we have, whether it's MiCA or MiFID or the DLT pilot regime that have really set the bar for other major economies and have included elaborate regulation around whether it's cryptocurrencies or stable coins or, digital securities. Outside of the EU, take Switzerland, for example. There is a comprehensive DLT law there that, for example, allows privately held companies to issue shares in tokenized form. So imagine the opportunity for someone like us to go to these Swiss companies and say, you're already issuing shares in tokenized format. Well, come and list those tokenized shares on the INX trading platform, and you're tapping into global liquidity. We're seeing Hong Kong starting to issue type 1, type 7 licenses. Singapore, Korea is moving forward with a regulatory framework, Japan, and obviously the big United States, where we happen to hold licenses. I like to say, well, we are operating in a fully regulated fashion in the United States because we are adhering to what's called the Jobs Act, and the digital security side, that's way more clear. When people complain about the United States being slow on regulating, it's more the kind of the crypto assets, the utility tokens, and that angle, which is the mainstream kind of crypto focus. But the regulators obviously have to understand the risks. I get it. It's going to take a while, but also think about, how do regulators hire the right people with the right experiences, right? Because you can't just work with your existing team that's been sat at the regulator for the last 20, 30 years. You need to get in the new breed of crypto trader and people who have lost money, who have invested, who have had wallets hacked. You have to bring this experience into the regulator in order to actually, provide meaningful context to the regulation. So, but having said that, I think with the ETFs that just got approved, we're just going to see, I think, more and more traction over time.
And I know you've touched on it there. Well, what's the role of INX in this new industry?
Well, we are definitely one of the early movers, right? We see ourselves as a thought leader, as a pioneer in the space. We are the first and still the only company that has done a full prospectus IPO under US securities laws, on the blockchain. We are also one of the very few that can bridge cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin or Ethereum or stablecoins like USDC as an on-ramp into the digital securities side of things. We have a transfer agent, the INX transfer agent, that is actively distributing dividends on behalf of our clients. We've done multiple of those. We have the ATS, which is the trading platform for these security tokens, where they are listed, and issuers of these and holders of these tokens are able to access a global marketplace. And we're doing real volume. We're doing actual real volume on these security tokens. We listed a brand new security token this morning, a couple of hours ago. We paid out a dividend distribution in USDC stablecoin late last night on chain. So our role is to lead by, showing how you can do capital markets, on blockchain rails, and do it, boldly, do it clearly, transparently, communicate it out to the world and say, this works. It's proven. There are significant benefits to doing it, and I'm always, I'm always accessible, whether it's through LinkedIn. I love to educate people and talk through this entire process and this journey, because we need to carry the space along, right? We need to empower others who are looking to get into this, who are looking to use those types of solutions or provide solutions like INX, to come along and understand that it is doable now.
And hopefully this podcast is also helping educate people as well.
Absolutely. Like looking at the trade finance, the TFD initiative and the ecosystem and the members, a lot of them are from a traditional financial background, right? And have been doing, providing those services, without blockchain rails, without those technologies, and should have partners like INX in that ecosystem to help, bridge that gap. So we're really excited to join the initiative, and hopefully, a lot of the members will see this video and want to reach out to understand how we can work together.
Absolutely. This is the Trade Finance Distribution Initiative podcast featuring Bob Ejodame from INX. Now, Bob, I've been reading up, and there's one question I want to ask you about security token offerings. How does INX support the adoption of STOs?
So the security token offering, when I introduced myself at the start, I talked about in 2017, you had those ICOs, initial coin offerings. And that was a way to say we're, a company, for example, or a fund is looking to raise capital to build out its business model, right? To deliver its business plan. And a coin, a token would represent that investment and be distributed to investors. The initial coin offering, or the ICOs, got a bad rep because they were completely unregulated. Billions of dollars were raised that just disappeared. And so when we got into the space, the term STO was preferred, security token offering. And within the INX context, you have to understand the US regulations. So the Jobs Act, which was passed under the Obama administration, sets out a series of mechanisms through which companies can raise capital. So at the very high end, you have the IPO, which we followed when we did it in a tokenized format. And at the lower end, you have a regulation crowdfund, a Reg CF. And you have a Reg D, a Reg S. And these are all mechanisms that allow a company to raise capital from a specific audience, and maybe there'll be a cap on how much they can raise in a year. And incidentally, the man who is known as the father of the Jobs Act, who literally spearheaded this whole the Jobs Act with Congress in the United States, is David Wield, who happens to be the chairman of the INX board of directors. So we're very close to the Jobs Act and to what it means to empower businesses, especially smaller businesses, in raising capital at low costs, low complexity, without onerous, reporting requirements, but still in a regulated way. So the security token offering is when INX works with a client, with an issuer, to raise capital pursuant to one of those SEC mechanisms. And at the end of the raise, once the money is in the bank, we then distribute the tokens on behalf of that issuer to all of their investors. And those tokens can now represent either the equity that the issuer was giving away, or a profit share, which is the case in the INX token, for example, or yield or coupon on a debt asset, for example. And that's where once these investors now receive those tokens and hold them, they could then become listed for trading on the secondary market on INX, or INX's transfer agent can pay dividends on behalf of those issuers directly into those wallets of those investors. So the security token offering is a truly groundbreaking, mechanism within capital markets. And if you look out across, what the big guys are saying, like Larry Fink at BlackRock, and why Citigroup is getting involved, it's because everyone is understanding that it's inevitable that that capital markets are going to move on chain. And so with the way we've positioned ourselves, I think we're going to be in for a really exciting ride.
You mentioned you were close to the Jobs Act, and I wanted to ask you, how close are you with regulators? How are you working together with the regulators?
So regulators will never come out and say, oh, we're working with that, or they'll rarely do that. They'll always maintain, impartiality. But we do have, by virtue of being such an early mover and such a, doing groundbreaking things under the umbrella of FINRA or the SEC, or even the money transmitter licenses, of which we've got 48 right now that we require on the crypto side. We have, through our chief compliance officer or other, key members of our team, very cordial relationships, with relevant folks at places like FINRA, right, or the SEC, where, they'll sometimes just want to have a chat and say, hey, what do you think about this new feature that some other player has announced? And, so it's very encouraging for us to see that we are, not just a thought leader to industry, but to the regulator as well. And we hope that just continues. And as we look at our global licensing requirements, potentially start to build similar relationships with regulators in many other jurisdictions.
Good to hear. Now, I just wanted to ask you as well about how you're working with other members of the TFDI initiative. You've just joined as a new member. So I just wanted to ask you about the other members.
Yeah, so we've just joined formally, but we've had, I've had a series of conversations with various players in the space. I have a couple of guys on my team that are very much focused on trade finance and how we can get in there and be meaningful in the way we can impact the space. So we've spoken to a couple of the, whether it's those on the origination side or on the investment side, whether it's a trade tech team itself with whom we've had conversations, or even the technology providers like your XDCs and so on that are within the platform, so that we can start to create like blockchain interoperability, so that if one of the participants of the TFDI wants to have their token live on blockchain X or blockchain Y, that doesn't become a blocker for them. We can just support multiple blockchains, have multiple wallet infrastructures. So we are actively speaking with a small number so far, but I think this is going to open up the door now to where, I'm probably going to be quite busy in the coming weeks, just kind of, hopefully going through the list. But yeah, like I said, super excited to be in this space where it's a very focused one. It's very sort of, trade finance and everything that comes with that. So it's going to be a very focused, I think, conversation, hopefully with some quick wins for all sides.
Well, we're very pleased to have you as part of our community. So it sounds like you're going to be very busy in the coming weeks and months. Is there anything else you wanted to say about INX? You've told us a great deal about it and explained it very well. What's next?
Yes, there is so much on the horizon, especially as 2024 has ushered in a new, bull market, if you want to call it that. It's, potentially still kind of early days. We know we're more or less agreeing that this has been a soft landing with the global economy. Everyone's looking now towards the, the Fed and the Bank of England and the ECB as to when are we going to start seeing rates being cut. The whole crypto world is in this very excited, charged space, and we're seeing a direct correlated effect on the business that's coming into our pipeline that's looking to explore tokenization opportunities. So yeah, we have a lot on the plate. Something I'd like to mention is a formal collaboration agreement that we have signed with a company called Republic. Republic is the largest crowdfunding platform globally that over time have evolved their business model and their strategy to involve advisory on blockchain implementations, wallet infrastructure, capital market solutions, and the relationship that INX has now built with Republic through this formal collaboration agreement, and Republic did invest in INX last year in July and is now a shareholder, is one that really, expands the value that we can offer significantly. So we are now part of a bigger ecosystem, a much larger team, 350 plus people globally spread out across different regions. INX brings some very unique capabilities into that ecosystem, specifically our ATS, the secondary trading venue, right? So Republic, who deal with, hundreds of companies on an annual basis, and I think there are close to 3,000 companies that have raised capital through that system, can now look to INX as a secondary trading venue, as an additional blockchain-enabled player within that ecosystem. So we're super excited, supercharged in our reach, in our capabilities now through that relationship. So I think that's definitely something worth mentioning.
Well, we wish you all the best for the future. Bob Ejodame, VP of Capital Markets at INX, thank you for speaking to the Trade Finance Distribution Initiative podcast.
Thank you so much, Andy. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening today. Please subscribe to stay in the loop for all of our videos and podcasts. Follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. That's the best place to keep in touch with everything we do. And go to tradefinancedistribution.com for everything else you need to know.